Hello, you're watching movie snapshot scenes and this is the summary of Get Out. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Chris Washington, a young black photographer, packed his bags for a weekend trip with his white girlfriend, Rose Armitage. They had been dating for 5 months, and this was the first time Chris would meet her family. Nervous, but trying to stay relaxed, he asked Rose if her parents knew he was black. She laughed it off. Of course they knew, and they weren't racist. After all, her father would have voted for Obama a 3rd time if he could, Chris chuckled. But a small knot of unease lingered in his stomach. The drive to the Armitage estate was long, taking them deep into the woodsy suburbs. Tall trees loomed over the road, their shadows stretching like fingers in the fading daylight. As they neared the house, a deer suddenly leaped in front of the car. Rose slammed the brakes, but the impact was unavoidable. The animal crumpled against the hood, its body twitching before going still. Chris and Rose sat in stunned silence. A police car arrived shortly after. The officer, a white man with a cold demeanor, asked for Chris's license, even though Rose had been driving. She protested, but Chris handed it over without argument, his jaw tight. The tension thickened until, surprisingly, Rose's intervention made the cop back off. As they drove away, Chris exhaled, grateful but unsettled. Finally, they arrived at the Armitage mansion, a sprawling, elegant home surrounded by lush greenery. Rose's parents, Dean and Missy, greeted them warmly. Dean, a neurosurgeon, was all smiles and jokes, while Missy, a hypnotherapist, had a calm, almost piercing gaze. They seemed welcoming, but something felt off. At dinner, Dean made awkward comments about black physicality, praising Chris's genetic makeup. Missy insisted Chris try her tea, her tone just a little too insistent. Meanwhile, the 2 black servants, groundskeeper Walter and housekeeper Georgina, acted strangely, their movements stiff, their speech unnatural. That night, Chris stepped outside to smoke, trying to shake the odd vibe of the house. As the ember of his cigarette glowed in the dark, he noticed Walter sprinting through the trees at an unnatural speed, before stopping abruptly, staring blankly into the distance. Something was very wrong here. The next morning, Chris woke up feeling uneasy. The guest room was too quiet, the air too still. He tried to shake off the feeling. Maybe he was just overthinking things. After all, Rose's parents had been nothing but polite. At breakfast, Dean enthusiastically showed Chris around the property, boasting about the family's history. He pointed out the framed photos of Rose's ancestors, all white, all smiling. Chris nodded politely, but his eyes kept drifting to Walter, the groundskeeper, who was now staring at him from across the yard. When their eyes met, Walter suddenly grinned, too wide, too forced, before turning away. Missy joined them, sipping her tea with that same unnerving calm. She asked Chris about his smoking habit, suggesting she could help him quit through hypnosis. He politely declined, but she smiled like she already knew something he didn't. Later, the Armitages hosted a gathering, friends and neighbors arriving for what seemed like an annual garden party. The guests were all wealthy, all white, and all oddly fascinated by Chris. They complimented his physique, asked invasive questions about his background, and made backhanded remarks about black culture. One elderly woman even grabbed his arm, feeling his bicep, murmuring, "So strong." Chris forced a smile, but his discomfort grew with every interaction. Then he noticed another black man at the party, Logan King, a well-dressed guest who stood out among the sea of white faces. Relieved, Chris approached him, hoping for some normalcy. But Logan's behavior was just as strange as Walter's and Georgina's. His speech was stilted. His smile didn't reach his eyes. And when Chris took out his phone to snap a photo, Logan suddenly flinched, shouting, "Get out!" before awkwardly laughing it off. Confused and disturbed, Chris pulled Rose aside. She dismissed his concerns, blaming the heat and the alcohol for the guest's weird behavior. But when Chris showed her Logan's picture, His camera flash revealed something terrifying. For a split second, Logan's expression changed, his eyes wide with panic, as if screaming without sound. That night, Chris lay awake, his mind racing. The house creaked around him, whispers of movement just outside his door. Then, a faint rhythmic scratching sound like fingernails dragging across wood. He wasn't imagining things. Something was very, very wrong. The scratching noise stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Chris sat up in bed, sweat cooling on his skin. He told himself it was just the house settling. Old wood, wind, nothing more. But sleep wouldn't return. At dawn, he wandered downstairs, finding Missy already awake, sipping tea in the sunroom. Before he could retreat, she called him over, her voice smooth but firm. "You don't sleep well, do you, Chris?" She already knew. She offered to help. Just a simple hypnosis session, no pressure. Chris hesitated, but exhaustion and curiosity won out. He sat across from her as she tapped her spoon against the teacup, the metallic ting filling the room. "Now, relax." Her voice lulled him into a trance. His limbs grew heavy, his mind adrift. Then, darkness. He was falling, tumbling through a void, unable to move or scream. Shadows pressed in, suffocating him. Somewhere in the abyss, a voice whispered, "Now, sink." Chris gasped awake, back in the sunroom, tears streaming down his face. Missy watched him with quiet satisfaction. The mind is a powerful thing, she said. Shaken, Chris retreated to his room. He needed air, needed to call someone, anyone who could make sense of this, but his phone had no signal. That afternoon, Rose's brother Jeremy arrived, muscular, intense, with a predator's grin. He jokingly challenged Chris to a fight, testing his reflexes. "You're built different, man," Jeremy said, eyes gleaming. "Perfect genetics." At dinner, the family's questions grew stranger. "Do you believe in the superiority of the human body?" Dean asked. "Would you submit to improvement?" Chris laughed nervously, but no one else did. That night, he searched online for missing black men in the area. His stomach dropped. Photos of familiar faces, including Walter and Georgina, under different names. A floorboard creaked behind him. Rose stood in the doorway, her smile fading. "Babe, what are you doing?" For the first time, Chris saw something in her eyes he didn't recognize. Something cold. Chris forced a smile, quickly closing the laptop. "Just checking emails," he lied. Rose tilted her head, studying him a moment too long before her cheerful mask slipped back into place. "Come to bed," she said softly. "You look exhausted." But sleep was impossible. Every creak of the house felt deliberate. Around 3 a.m., Chris noticed something. A small hidden compartment in the closet. Inside, a box of photos. Rose with past black partners, all smiling, all familiar. His blood ran cold. One face stood out, the man from the party, Logan King, but in the photo, his name was Andre Hayworth, a missing person from Brooklyn. A muffled noise came from downstairs. Chris followed it to the basement door, which was slightly ajar. The air smelled sterile, like a hospital. Peering inside, he saw medical equipment, surgical tools, and a small TV playing static. Except the static formed shapes. Faces. Screaming. Hand grabbed his shoulder. Chris whirled around to find Georgina, her expression eerily vacant. "You shouldn't be down here," she said, her voice monotone. Then her face twisted, just for a second, into sheer terror. "Run!" He backed away, bumping, into Jeremy, who grinned. Late night exploring. Before Chris could react, Jeremy lunged. A struggle, fists, a flash of pain. Then Chris escaped, sprinting upstairs. He needed his keys, his phone, anything. Rose stood in the foyer, blocking the door. Her sweet demeanor was gone. "Chris," she sighed, disappointed. "We were so close." A needle pricked his neck. Missy stepped from the shadows, whispering, Now, sink. Darkness swallowed him whole. Chris woke up strapped to a leather chair, his limbs heavy, his vision blurred. The room was dim, flickering light from an old projector casting ghostly images on the wall. Dean Armitage stood before him, grinning like a proud teacher. "Welcome back, Chris," he said. "You're about to be part of something extraordinary." The projector whirred to life, showing a slideshow of black men and women, athletes, artists, soldiers, all labeled with traits like physical superiority or creative instinct. Then, footage of surgeries, brains being altered, bodies controlled. "We transplant consciousness," Dean explained. "The Armitages have been refining this for generations. Wealthy clients pay to live in stronger, younger bodies. And you, Chris, you're perfect." Chris strained against the restraints, panic rising. He remembered Georgina's hollow stare, Walter's robotic movements, their minds erased, replaced by others. "Rose finds them," Missy added, stroking Chris's hair. "Her type is always so impressive." A door opened. Rose entered, holding a teacup, the same one from the hypnosis. "Drink this," she said sweetly. "It'll make the transition easier." Chris spat in her face. Jeremy punched him, stars exploding behind his eyes. As they prepped the surgery tools, Chris spotted a loose nail in the chair's armrest. He worked his wrist against it, skin tearing, blood slicking his fingers. Click, one hand free. He lunged, grabbing Jeremy's scalpel and slashing Dean's throat. Blood sprayed as the room erupted into chaos. Missy screamed. Rose scrambled for a weapon. Chris didn't look back. He ran. Blood pounded in Chris's ears as he sprinted through the Armitage mansion, the screams of the family fading behind him. The house felt alive, walls closing in, shadows reaching for him. He burst into the kitchen, grabbing a butcher knife just as Jeremy tackled him from behind. They crashed through glass cabinets, fists flying. Jeremy, stronger and fueled by rage, pinned Chris down, his hands closing around his throat. "You were supposed to be perfect," he snarled. Chris drove the knife into Jeremy's side. Once, twice. The grip loosened. Rose appeared in the doorway, shotgun in hand, but for a split second, her face wavered. Was that guilt? Fear? Chris didn't wait to find out. He dove out the window as the blast shattered the glass behind him. Outside, Walter, no, the man who used to be Walter, stood frozen, clutching his rifle. Their eyes met. Something flickered in Walter's gaze. Recognition. He turned the gun on himself. The headlights of a car screeched into the driveway. Chris's friend Rod, the TSA officer he'd texted earlier. "Get in!" Rod yelled. Chris leaped into the car just as Rose fired again, the shot blowing out a tire. Rod floored it anyway, the car fishtailing down the driveway. In the back seat, Chris hyperventilated, his hands stained with blood that wasn't all his. Rod tossed him his phone. Called the cops, but yo, what the actual fuck was that? Chris didn't answer. On the newsfeed, a photo of the Armitage estate flashed. Prominent family dies in apparent murder-suicide. No mention of the basement, no mention of him. The screen glitched. For one frame, he saw them, the faces in the static, screaming. Then it was gone. Rod turned onto the highway. "Man, you better be done with white girls after this." Chris finally laughed, sharp and raw. The sun rose ahead of them. He didn't look back.